بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome back everyone to lecture 12. Inshallah, we're going to begin with the section of Al-Aqdariyah, which is a scenario in which there is a sister who is left after the deceased, a sister and a grandfather. And this is a difference of opinion between the Hanafis and the other madhahib, in which case the sister will get a half. Yeah, sister will get a half and the grandfather will get a sixth. And this is, as I said, a difference of opinion in the madhahib. The Shafi'i, Malik, and the Hanbali, the Jamhur, is going to follow what's in these lines as opposed to the Hanafis, and then he will give the scenario of that. So that's the Aqdariyah, which is verse 114 to 118. Following that, we will begin into the section of calculation. So now we leave the sections of inheritance, which we've been talking about, and now we're going to get into, which is a very important thing, which unfortunately is not in the Matn of Abi Shuja, how you actually calculate these things. And it's called Babul Hisab, the section of calculation, and we are going to read from about half of it, from lines 119 to line 134. And we are going to learn that there is the lowest common denomination that we are called al-usul, that we are going to search for the fractions. So these are 7 numbers that we just memorize, and we know that in any calculation or inheritance situation, that number is going to be the total number of the shares. Some of those numbers can increase and some of those numbers do not increase. In today's lecture, we're going to learn about those numbers, and then we will discuss the numbers that increase and the numbers that don't increase. And by doing that, whatever the combination is, your mind is automatically going to go, it's one of those numbers. That, in other words, if we say this person gets a half, this person gets a sixth, this person gets a third, out of what? Out of what is what we're going to answer in this lecture, meaning the total number of shares, and then we go back and then you apply the fraction to the total number of shares and then have the correct type of inheritance distribution. Those are the main points for today's lecture. We'll begin the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. All right, so we'll begin the way we normally begin, which is to turn directly to the text that we are going to read, which in this case is the Matn of the Rahabiyya poem. We're going to read 114 to 118. I think it's just easier for me to do Arabic, English, and then go back and comment. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. والأخت لا فرض مع الجد لها فيما عدا مسألة كملها. And the sister has no share with the grandfather in what exceeds the case already concluded, meaning the case he's about to discuss. And because it's a rare case, it has its own section and its own name. زوج وأم وهما تمامها. The husband and the mother, and these two are all of them, meaning the sister, who is left is the sister, the grandfather, the husband, and the mother. Okay, so a woman dies, she leaves her husband and mother, a sister and a grandfather. This is the scenario. فَاعْلَمْ فَخَيْرُ أُمَّةٍ عَلَّمُهَا. And know then, for the best of this nation is he who knows best. Line 116. تعرف يا صاحب الأكدرية وهي بأن تعرفها حرية. This is known, friend, as al-Aqdariyah. This is what the case is called, most likely from the name of a tribe. There's differences of opinion of why it's called that, and they deserve to be remembered by you. Line 117. فيفرض النصف لها والسدس له حتى تعول بالفروض المجملة. Half then is given to her, so the sister is going to get half, a sixth to him, meaning the grandfather, until there is a remainder after the entire share. So there'll be a remainder of the inheritance that will be distributed then to the husband and to the mother. Correct, husband and mother. Let me just make sure. Yes, after that. Line 118. ثم يعودان إلى المقاسمة كما مضى فاحفظه واشكر ناظمه. Then they return to the distribution as before mentioned, recollect and thank the author. So in this situation, the sister's going to get the half, the grandfather is going to get a sixth, and then the mother and the husband will follow the normal rules of the distribution. So, as we said, this is the position of Shafi'i, Imam Shafi'i, the Malik and the Jumhur. So as I said, the grandfather will get a sixth, the sister gets a half. Now, as kind of a foreshadowing of the hisab, of the section of calculation, in this situation, the lowest denomination is 27. So, in this, sorry, I'm a little lost here. One second. Okay, well, if I'm going to do that, it's going to get a little confusing. So let me not do the mathematical part now because we haven't gotten to that section. The bottom line is, as the line stated, we're going to give the sister a half share, the grandfather a sixth share, and then the remaining two people, the husband and the mother, are going to follow what is normally followed in the inheritance distribution. Okay. Next section is the section of calculation. So I'm going to begin by doing 119 to 123. I'm just following the commentary that the commentary that I have, the Muradini commentary. I'm just following the chunks that he gives. So I guess I'll do Arabic and English. 119. وإن ترد معرفة الحساب لتهتدي به إلى صواب. And if you desire a knowledge of computation, you will by its means attain the right proceeding. 120. وتعرف القسمة والتفصيل وتعلم التصحيح والتأصيل. And you will understand divisions and analysis and be acquainted with fractions and the lowest common denomination. Because if you have all of these different fractions, then you got to find the lowest common denominator or lowest common denomination to which these fractions can equitably be applied. That's why studying mathematics is one of the auxiliary sciences of the Sharia, because when it comes to this type of stuff. 121. فاستخرج الأصول في المسائل ولا تكن عن حفظها بذاهل. Extract then the lowest common denomination in solving problems, and be not remiss in committing them to memory. 122. فإنهن سبعة أصول ثلاثة منهن قد تعول. There are 7 lowest common denominations agreed upon, 3 of which proportionally increase. And then 123. وبعدها أربعة تمام لا عول يعروها ولا انثلام. And after them 4 complete denominations, to which no proportional increase belongs, nor any fraction. Okay, so basically the game plan, when you have this just requires a lot of practice, and I gotta admit I'm not like superstar inheritance fiqh man, but you know, by going through the material and teaching it to you, obviously I spend a significant amount of time before I hit record to kind of retain the information and go through the commentary to do justice to the topic. It's a lot of it is memory. You have to memorize the fractions, and then you have to memorize who gets the fractions, and then you have to remember this part, which is that there are 6 core 7 core, 7 core denominations. Some of them can increase and some of them don't increase. All that means is that depending on those combinations of fractions, there has to be a lowest common denominator to which the fractions can be applied so that you can equally distribute. If there's a half and a fourth and a sixth, well then how much is the whole? It's just a mathematical question. And that's basically what he's doing here. But alhamdulillah, you don't have to actually reconstruct. All you have to remember are those 7 numbers. And know that some of the numbers can increase, as he said, and some of them will not increase. 3 of them increase. So out of the 7, 3 of those numbers can proportionally increase. Some of them increase multiple times because you have to just go to one higher number till you get the lowest common denomination or lowest common denominator. And then the 4 other ones don't increase. It's always like that. So those are kind of easy. When you commit that to memory, my suggestion to myself and to you is that we will memorize those things first. And then we will start practicing, okay, somebody dies and they leave behind all these different people. Then you can train yourself to quickly figure out, okay, I know that these people get these fractions. Okay, and with the presence of these fractions, this is the whole. Therefore, I apply the whole to the actual money estate that's left, and then we can figure out who gets actually the dollar amount of which thing. So it's pretty straightforward. Now, what are the agreed upon, the 7 agreed upon? Forget about the mukhtalaf fihi, because the lowest common denominations in which there's a difference of opinion, the reason there's a difference of opinion is some people say it's just an increase, a proportional increase. So forget about that right now. Let's just talk about the 7. It's 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, 24. That's it. That's all we're talking about. Those are the whole numbers that are the lowest possible denomination to which the fractions of the Islamic inheritance law can be applied. 2, 3, 4, so 2, 3, 4 in a row. 6, 8, 12, 24. Now, 3 of these numbers can proportionally increase, which are going to be the 6, 12, and 24. And then 4 of the numbers don't increase, which is 2, 3, 4, and 8. So basically, the rest of today's lecture, that's what we're going to be talking about. And I'll give you guys the examples that he gives in the book to understand. So again, what are these numbers? These numbers are the lowest common denomination to which the combination of inheritance fractions in Islam can be applied. So now that we've talked about the fractions and then we learn who gets what fractions, we'll forget about who gets what fractions. Let's just do the numbers. Now that we've memorized the fractions, now we also know that these are the potential outcomes so we can calculate the estate. We'll pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, let's do line 124 to 127. He says, rahimahullah, فَالسُّدْسُ مِنْ سِتَّةِ أَسْهُمٍ يُرَى وَالثُّلُثُ وَالرُّبْعُ مِنْ إِثْنَى عَشَرَ. Now the 6 you will see is from 6 portions, and the 3rd and the 4th from 12. Line 125. وَالثُّمِنُ إِنْ ضُمَّ إِلَيْهِ السُّدُسُ فَأَصْلُهُ الصَّادِقُ فِيهِ الْحَدَثُ. And if to an 8th a 6th be added, the new denominations concerning which the calculation is just, continuing the next line 126, أَرْبَعَةَ يَتْبَعُهَا عِشْرُونَ يَعْرِفُهَا الْحُسَابُ أَجْمَعُونَ, becomes 4 which 20 follow, just to make the line rhyme meaning 24, as mathematicians universally know. And then line 127, فَهَذِي ثَلَاثَةُ الْأُصُولُ إِن كَثُرَتْ فُرُودُهَا تَعُولُ. And these 3 dominations, if the shares be many, they can increase. Okay, so it's just a fancy way of saying that we are dealing with the core numbers. The 3 core numbers that can increase the 6, the 12, and the 24. That's basically all he's saying. So, for example, any situation in which there is a 6th, like the remaining after the deceased, a mother and a son, or two parents and a son. So that means al-asl, the lowest denomination, is going to be 6, because you're dealing with 1/6. If with 1/6 you have, I'm talking about, when I say the fraction, I mean the inheritance share. When I give you the whole number, we're talking about the lowest denomination. So if the inheritance shares that we are dealing with is a sixth, a half, or a third, or 2/3, such as a daughter, an uncle, a paternal uncle, or a mother and her 2 children and an uncle, paternal uncle, or a mother and 2 daughters and a paternal uncle. So in that case, the whole number, the lowest denomination that we're dealing with, is also going to be 6. Likewise, if we're dealing in a situation in which there is a half fraction and a third fraction, like a husband and a mother and a paternal uncle. Now, if we are dealing with a situation in which the fractions that we have are a fourth and a sixth, then the lowest denomination is going to be 12, such as a husband, a mother, a son. I'm not going to read you all of the examples. If the situation or the inheritance scenario has the fractions of an eighth or a sixth, that means the lowest denomination is going to be 24. Like if you had a son, a wife, and a mother. So in these situations, in these numbers, as he will come to show us in the next 3 lines of poetry, of the poem, 6, 12, and the 24, they are numbers that can increase. So the 6 can increase to 7, to 8, to 9, to 10. So the 6 can increase 4 times, depending on the scenario. The 12 can increase 3 times. 12 can become 13, 15, or 17. And then the 24 can increase 1 to 28. So, even though there are 7 core lowest denomination numbers, in the issue of 6, 12, and 24, they can increase. So if you, I always use the example of the accordion, if you expanded out the accordion, the 6 can yield also 7, 8, 9, 10, so you would add 4 to the 6, so that would be 5. The 12 could increase 3 times, 13, 15, 17, so we added now 3, and then the 24 can increase once to 28. So yes, there are 7, but the 3 can also increase to give you more numbers. And that's it. And that's meaning that's pretty much all of the numbers that we are, the lowest denomination numbers that we are going to be dealing with in Islamic law. So let's begin the next 3 lines. 128. فَتَبْلُغُ سِتَّةُ عِقْدُ الْعَشَرَةِ فِي سُورَةٍ مَعْرُوفَةٍ مُشْتَهَرَةٍ. And let 6 come to the connection of 10 in the known scenario, commonly delineated, meaning 6 can slide all the way to 10 through 7, 8, and 9. So 6 can become 7, 8, 9, 10, so we get 4 more. It's just the line of poetry to make it rhyme in Arabic. 129. وَتَلْحَقُ الَّتِي تَلِيهَا بِالْأَثَرِ فِي الْعَوْلِ أَفْرَادًا إِلَى 17. And that which follows this portion, meaning 12, increases until it reaches 17. So 12 can become 13, 15, and 17. Okay, you have to skip the even numbers. So you skip 14 to get to 15, skip 16 to get 17. And then line 130, in line 130, وَالْعَدَدُ الثَّالِثُ قَدْ يَعُولُ بِثُمْنِهِ فَعْمَلْ بِمَا أَقُولُ. And the third number can increase, meaning 24 will increase once. Of its 8th part, proceed then as I direct, meaning 24 can become 28. Okay, so let me give you the examples. I probably won't get through all of them in this clip, but it's helpful nonetheless. So we said 6 can become 7, such as if you have a husband, 2 sisters, and 2 parents, or a father. So in this case, the husband gets a half. The two sisters get 2/3. So therefore, we need 7. The whole has to be 7. So the husband gets half, which is 3, and then the two sisters get a fourth. Get 2/3, which is 4, meaning 4 portions. So it's not enough to say the husband gets half. Okay, what is half? How much is the portion? The whole portion? We're going to say the whole thing is out of 7. So he's going to get a 3. So if the whole portion is 7, we're dealing with 1/7. So the husband will get 3/7. When I say the husband gets 3, it means 3 out of 7, because now the whole number is 7. So that's an example of 6 going to 7. How about an example of 6 going to 8? We have a husband, a mother, 2 sisters. Two sisters not from the mother. So the husband and the mother and the or another example, afwan, is a husband, a mother, and 2 full sisters and a father. This, by the way, is just called al-mubahala. It's just sometimes they have their own names. So a husband gets half in both scenarios. And then the mother an eighth in the first scenario and a fourth in the second scenario. So therefore we need to create the lowest denomination out of that will be 8. Now how about example of 9? Is if you have a husband, a mother, 3 sisters. Husband gets half, the sisters get half, and the rest get a 1/6. So in this case, the lowest denomination to accommodate those fractions is going to be 9. And then lastly, 6 to 10. How do we go from 6 to the number 10? We'll have a situation in which we have a husband, a mother, 2 sisters to the mother side, from the mother side, and a full sister, and a sister from the father side. So in that scenario, when we apply the fractions to it, we're going to go 6 to 10. So all of these examples are based on the number 6, because we know from the previous lines of poetry, lines 124 to 127, that a 6th fraction is involved. So when a 6th fraction is involved, we know that we're beginning to contemplate the lowest denomination, number 6, for the whole estate, but 6 can go to 7, 8, 9, and 10. Let me pick this up in the next and final clip, inshallah. Okay, so we're talking about, currently we're commenting on lines 128 to 130. We learned that the number 6 as a lowest common denominator can go to 7 or 8 or 9 and 10. Now the number 12 as a lowest common denominator, lowest common denomination or denominator, sorry. It can increase 3 times only. 12 can go to 13 or 15 or 17. An example of 12 going to 13 is if there are 2 children, two daughters, afwan, a mother and a husband, or a wife, a mother, a sister from the mother, and another half sister. So in that example, 12 will have to go to 13 to accommodate the fractions. 12 going to 15 in the scenario if you had 2 daughters, a husband, 2 parents, or if you had a wife, 2 sisters from the mother's side, and 2 other sisters not from the mother's side. So in that case, the lowest denomination that would accommodate the fractions of the inheritance would be 15. But that's originally coming from 12, right? Because in the first cup that we talked about, Going back for a second. Okay. And then 12 going to 17. Well, I don't want to, well, let me do that. 12 going to 17 is if you have a wife, a mother, children from the wife, and two sisters not from the mother's side. In that example, the lowest denomination would be 17, which originally comes from 12. And then we said 24 only can increase once to 28. So if there are 4 daughters of the son and 4 full grandparents, in that example 24 would become 28. So in going back to line 124 to 127, whenever we have a sixth fraction, we're going to start to consider 6 as the lowest common denomination, and that can slide. Whenever we have a third or a fourth fraction, all the examples that we just gave previously were thirds and fourths. That means that the lowest number that we can consider is 12, knowing that 12 can increase to 13, 15, or 17. And then when we have an eighth and a sixth involved, then we know that we're going to consider 24 as the lowest number that can go up to 28. Okay, and then the last lines for today's lecture are lines 131 to 134, the other lines, the other fractions that we have. So again, we'll read the Arabic and the English. So line 131, قال رضي الله عنه والنصف والباقي أو النصفان أصلهما في حكمهم اثنان. And a half and what remains, or 2 halves, their denomination in the rule concerning them is 2. Well, obviously, if you have halves, then the whole is going to be 2. Not 1, because 1 then will be a half, it will be confusing. So when we're dealing with halves, the whole is going to be 2. Line 132. وَالثُّلُثُ مِنْ ثَلَاثَةِ يَكُونُ وَالرُّبْعُ مِنْ أَرْبَعَةِ مَسْنُونُ. And the third comes obviously from 3. I hope that's clear. And the fourth is formed from 4. 133. وَالثُّمْنُ إِنْ كَانَ فَمِنْ ثَمَانِيَةٍ فَهَذِهِ هِيَ الْأُصُولُ الثَّانِيَةِ. And the eighth, if it be required, is from 8. And these are the second denominations. For the lines to rhyme. And then 134, لا يدخل العول عليها فاعلمي ثم اسلكي التصحيح فيها واقسمي. To which no increase belongs, so know this, then pursue the method of verifying it and distribute. Meaning in these numbers that we just mentioned, 2, 3, 4, and 8, there is no increase of proportions, as we just did in the first 3 numbers. They are what they are, and then that becomes a very simple situation. Okay, so anything in which there is a half and what is remaining, like if you had a husband and an uncle, paternal uncle, or if there was a half and a half, like the husband and a full sister or a father. So the asl, the lowest denomination we're dealing with is 2. So in the case in which there are 2 halves, then the whole estate is considered 2. So one person gets 1 of that 2, and the other person gets 1 of that 2. So the lowest, I'm just giving this is like the easiest example, just so we can understand why we're talking about all of this. So if somebody has died and left $100,000, and that's the estate, and we have a situation in which 2 people are going to inherit half and half, obviously, we're going to go to the estate and consider the 100,000 as 2 portions. So what's half of 2 is 1. So 50,000 and 50,000. I mean, that's just easy. But when the number is broken, when it's like he left $6,323, then okay, you're still going to do that. We're going to consider that two portions, meaning we cut it in half, or we have to consider 10 portions or 12 portions. That's what these portions are for. You're just going to take what's left in the estate and divide it by the portion. Now you know how much each portion is, and then each person is going to get their appropriate share of that portion. So it's not enough just to know the fraction of inheritance in the Quran and Sunnah, and then the person who gets that fraction. You also have to do the mathematical calculation, which is why this is an additional discussion. Now, any example in which there's a third and what is left, like the mother and the paternal uncle, or 2/3 and what is left, like two sons and a paternal uncle, this is where the whole is going to be considered 3. And then the scenarios in which there's a fourth and what is left, like a husband and a son, or a fourth and a half and what is left, like a husband and a daughter and a paternal uncle. So the lowest denomination is going to be 4. And then every scenario in which there's an eighth and what is left, like a husband and a son, or an eighth and a half and what is left, like a husband, like a wife, a daughter, and a paternal uncle. So its lowest denomination is going to be out of 8. And those are the proportions, the denominations do not experience an increase. And that's what I said in the introductory clip where I would stop for today's lecture. Now, as I said, just kind of to review where we are and what we're doing, the idea behind the mathematical calculation is when you have people that are inheriting and they all get a fraction because the fraction is dictated by the Quran and Sunnah, it's not enough to stop there, because then you have to take that fraction and actually apply it to the estate. So if somebody owns a property, and I get an eighth and you get a fourth and he gets a half, okay, we have to apply those fractions to the value of the property. Okay, the fraction is documented on the inheritance document, but when the property is liquidated, then how do you put those fractions together to get your actual fourth or an eighth of what? So that's where this mathematical computation comes in, is that we go back and we have lowest common denomination or lowest common denominator, and we know that there are 7 agreed upon, and then 3 of them can increase, and then the 4 that we just talked about don't increase. So they're not really 7, they're more than 7, but the ones that increase, they are just proportional increases of those 3 key numbers that we discussed. And then in tomorrow's clip, we'll continue. Tomorrow's clip will be just dedicated to, or the next clip, whenever you watch them, will be dedicated to just concluding this section. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's class we discussed lines 114 to lines 135, after 134. We began by looking at the al-Aqdiriyya scenario, which is a difference of opinion between the Jumhur and the Hanafis. The Jumhur, including the Shafi'is, give the daughter, the sister, in this case, a half when there's the grandfather in the scenario that we talked about. So there is the people that are left after the deceased is a husband and mother. A woman dies leaving a husband, a mother, a grandfather, and a sister. The sister, in this case, is going to get a half, and we talked about that. And then the bulk of the lecture was dealing with al-hisab, or the mathematical calculation, in which we learned that the goal of the mathematical calculation is to find the lowest common denominator to which the fractions of those people who are going to be inherited can be applied. And we learned that there are 7 agreed upon potential fraction numbers in Islamic law. There is 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. and that 3 of those numbers can increase. So 6, 12, and 24 can increase. 6 can increase to 7, 8, 9, or 10. 12 can increase to 13, 15, 17. And 24 can only increase to 28. So they can have the increase of the proportion. The other numbers, the other fractions that we talked about, which are 2, 3, 4, and 8, do not increase. The whole goal of that is that when we have people that inherit, we apply, first of all, we determine who is left from the inheritors. Of those people, who gets what fraction, who blocks who's the asaba, who's the universal male inheritor, etc. We apply the fractions to them. But then we have to go one more step, which is this step, which is, okay, based on the collected fractions that I have, what is the lowest common number to which those fractions can be applied? Once I get that number, then I can easily apply the fraction to that whole number and say, okay, you're going to get such and such, such and such, such and such, to be able to conclude out. Those are the main things that we talked about, and then we'll conclude this topic in the next clip. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.